Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week I have a few different things that I'm hoping to read through. Mostly I'm trying to catch up on my May TBR, even though it's now June. We got behind mainly because in July we're going to be moving, so there's been a lot of like house buying and packing up kind of things that we've been doing that just mean I haven't had as much time for reading. And in fact this week, technically next week because this is the weekend, or this is Saturday, so next week we are going to take some boxes to a family member's house like halfway to the town we're moving to, because it's like a 6-hour drive to where we're moving to, so we thought we'd just take some boxes and get a little bit ahead of the move. So after this I actually think I am going to pack up a bunch of my books. I was trying, I guess, not to have everything up in boxes too early before we moved, but it's probably just convenient to have them boxed up because the truth is, even though I like having my books out, I actually don't necessarily need to have them here or at the new house immediately. Like, as long as I have the books that I want to read, the rest of them can go in boxes for a while, and if they have to stay at someone's house for a while, that's fine. And also, I'm putting them kind of in all sorts of different sized boxes, so we'll probably use them kind of like as the fillers in the packing Tetris that we'll be doing. So they're probably going to end up all over the place, which is fine. So after this, I'm going to start packing up some of my books, but I will make sure to keep the books that I want to read out of that, of course. Mainly this one is a library book, so I need to also, before we move, make sure that I've read all my library books and get them returned because, you know, we're going to be living in another town, so I can't keep all my library books. It's a whole different library system there. So the first book that I have read the first chapter of is The Memory Theatre by Karin Tidbeck. I really loved Amatka by Karin Tidbeck. It's up on my shelf somewhere. Soon it'll be in a box. All I've gotten so far from the first chapter is that it's set in this world that's a little bit like Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland. Kind of whimsical, but also kind of dark. This is a world where the masters of this world every day will wake up and have some kind of big party. They don't necessarily remember things, or they don't remember events in order, so sometimes they'll have memories of things that haven't happened yet, but they won't necessarily remember yesterday. And they also play a lot of croquet, which is, you know, that Wonderland kind of reference. As well, the young people in this world are like their servants. So the main characters we've been introduced to are Dora and Thistle. Thistle is one of these servants. Unfortunately, he is starting to get older, and once you become a teenager or an adult, I'm not entirely clear on that yet, you get kicked out or you get killed, I think, actually. But I think they're going to try and escape to our world. Because the other main character we've met is this girl named Dora, and Dora seems to be the daughter of one of these party masters that they're somewhat ashamed of, even though she's beautiful, but they're ashamed because they don't know how to take care of her, so she's kept veiled and Thistle kind of looks after her. So I think eventually they're going to try and escape to our world, but so far we're just getting introduced to this Wonderland type world, and it's really dark and creepy in some bits, but in a like whimsical way, kind of like Wonderland, right, where these really dark and horrible scary things are happening, but it's whimsical, so like it's almost creepier. Anyway, I'm super excited for this, hoping to love it. And also, actually, it's quite thin, so I'm hoping to be able to get through it quite quickly, because the other thing I need to read to catch up on my May TBR is The Sword of Kaigen by Wang. I did buy a Kobo recently for my birthday, mainly so I could read library books on an e-reader, because in New Zealand you can't read library books on a Kindle. However, preparation me had already bought Sword of Kaigen for my Kindle, so we'll see how sad I am about reading things on my Kindle again instead of reading things on my Kobo, because I have really been enjoying being able to take notes with the stylus that I have for my Kobo, although I mean I can't take notes in my library books, so I guess we'll be okay with not taking notes in my Kindle. So Sword of Kaigen, I guess I'll get into the synopsis when I get to it. Hopefully I get to it. And then as well, I have an audiobook that I started on my run this morning. So I'm reading The Children of Men by P.D. James. This is a book that's I have watched the movie that's based on it. I was about to say it's based on the movie. That's wrong. the movie is based on the book. So it's set in this world where humans have become infertile and there's been no new children for like 25 years. And I really loved the beginning of the book where it's like describing how depressed people are and the different ways that people are dealing with the fact that there's no more children. And some of it is really messed up and some of it just feels really insightful. So I think I'm actually about 40% of the way through so far because it's not that long an audiobook. And primarily I'm liking the bits where we're getting these descriptions of the world. There is also a plot where our main character is like the cousin of the new dictator of England, and he's trying to, or there's a group that has kind of like pulled him into their conspiracy where they're trying to influence this warden of England, warden of Britain, I think. Anyway, that whole part I'm actually kind of bored by, and as well, like the beginning was written as like diary entries by our main character, and those parts I really liked, kind of his introspection about the world. And then just as I thought, oh, this whole book is going to be written as diary entries, it changed to like this third person part of, I guess, more telling the plot of the story. And because I don't like the plot as much, and I think as well just the writing style is different, so I'm not enjoying those bits as much. Every time it goes back to the diary and just more about his life and the way this weird world has influenced both his life and other people's lives, that's the part I'm enjoying about the story. And I do think that the movie plot was a little bit different. I would really like, after I've read this, to rewatch the movie. However, I can't do that for free in any way, so I think it's unlikely to happen. Because, you know, with the whole house buying and moving thing, we don't have a lot of extra funds at the moment. Even though it'd probably only be a couple of dollars, everything adds up, so we're probably not going to do it. Anyway, those are my reading plans and also, I guess, the moving plans for this week. And I will update you when we actually, or when I've actually read something. Okay, so if my fringe looks terrible in this clip or any other video that you see me in around now, know that it is because I have been trimming my own fringe and just making bad decisions all around. But anyway, let me update you on my reading. So firstly, I think I'm really close to the end of Children of Men, and I'm a little bit sad about it, I think is the way to say it. I really loved the descriptions of the setting in the beginning and some of the insights about what life might be like or how people might react to there no longer being children. And I think maybe because I've chosen not to have children, there was something kind of satisfying about reading some of that. But then most of what I've been reading of it in my last run was just stuff that I didn't really care about. Our main characters kind of got involved with this other like activist group, I guess, and a lot of what's happening with them just isn't that interesting. As well, the main character is really unlikable, which isn't that much of a big deal when you're just getting his description of the world. But when you actually have to watch him interacting in the world, I think it's much more frustrating. So I still really love the beginning, but I think I've become less enamored with it as I've gotten further through. I only have about 40 minutes left of listening to it, although I think I've pumped the speed up to like 2.25 times speed. And part of me is thinking that I should try and finish it off before tomorrow when we're going to go on our big drive to take some of our boxes halfway down the country, or a quarter of the way down the country. Anyway, big drive, and I won't be listening to my audiobook while we're away for a couple of days, so I kind of want to finish it off before that so that I haven't forgotten everything in the meantime. But also, I'm just not really enjoying it enough to feel motivated to do that. But as well, I do have some physical books that I've been reading. So The Memory Theatre. I read part 1 and then I decided I better update you before I get any further, because the next part I can see is called The Outside. So really what's happened in the first part is we have Dora and Thistle in this world with these adults that are all like crazy, and the world is like extravagant parties and croquet, but also really creepy. We had this dead guy turn up in the forest with a pocket watch, and also this character called Gorby. And Gorby was described as Her long face was the purple shade of storm clouds, and her eyes shone yellow. She smiled, and the smile was sharp and toothy, but not unfriendly. And I just feel like from this guy with the pocket watch and Gorby, we've got our Alice in Wonderland references in there, and it really does have that feel, that like whimsical dark feel to it. But at the end of the first part, basically now it looks like Thistle and Dora are going to get to leave this world and go somewhere else. There were definitely some other mysteries set up in the first part as well that I'm really interested to see what will happen with those things. So I'm enjoying this, but it's so strange and dark and twisted, and I'm enjoying trying to figure it out, but it also, like, it depends whether it turns into a book that you actually can figure out as to whether I'm going to enjoy it. Because at the moment I feel like there's a lot of things going over my head, and I hope they're not just like atmosphere. I hope they're like actual meaningful things, because that's what I prefer. So I'm going to continue that, but as well, I did realize when I went to go to bed that these days I actually prefer to be reading like an ebook at night, because even though Jay says he doesn't mind if I leave the light on in order to read when he's trying to sleep, I know that my ebook, as long as I don't shine it in his face, is less annoying. So I decided that my night book would be Sword of Kaigen, and I think I've been getting through a decent amount of it. So I'm 16% of the way through. That's not that far in. So far I've met kind of the main two characters, this mother and son. It's kind of set in this like Japanese type world, and reading all the names and some of the culture has made me appreciate my Japanese Duolingo that I've been doing, even if like that's maybe not the best way to learn Japanese. But I kind of like Japanese names, just the way they like roll off the tongue. Or maybe not roll off the tongue, because I sometimes suck at pronouncing them. My English tongue doesn't want to do it, but when you can say it, I don't know, something about it is like mentally stimulating. Anyway, the son in this family is going to the school, and it's a very prestigious family and a prestigious school, so he feels like he has a lot to live up to, and the whole village has this reputation or this tradition of being heroic warriors, and they believe that they have played a very significant role in the past of protecting their empire. However, this transfer student has turned up and started telling this boy, Mamoru, started telling him that maybe everything they believe isn't true, and it is breaking Mamoru's brain, and he's like basically having a breakdown because everything he believes seems like maybe it's not true. As well, though, we're getting his mother's perspective. Mizaki has clearly been like raised in this area, but then has lived in other places where she has learned a lot about the world. She seems to be an experienced swordswoman, perhaps with some other magical abilities. And I'm really just mystified how she has now ended up in the situation where she's living in this very strict culture where her only responsibility is basically to give birth to sons. She's given birth to 4, so everyone's saying that she's doing very well, but you can tell that she does miss something about her life from before when she was out having adventures. So at this point, I'm really just waiting for her son to come to her with these things that he's learned, and for, I don't know where it's going to go from there. So there's a few things set in place that is like moving things forward, but I'm only 16% of the way through, so it's kind of just the setup, and then hopefully something exciting will happen next. Anyway, as I said, tomorrow we're going to go on a big drive, so I probably won't update you for a couple of days, but maybe we'll have some lovely nature footage, and probably I won't get much reading done, but I guess we will see.
Pick it up from the top, hit restart. So far it's been so hard to live, but lately something in me changed. Let it go, let it be.
So that was a very whirlwind kind of trip. And to be honest, it's been a day since we got back because after all that driving, we kind of just needed some time to feel human again. My fringe is definitely not doing anything sensible still. Anyway, what did happen while we were away is I had some surprises come through from the library. So firstly, I have had the audiobook for Tidal Creatures by Seanan McGuire come through, and I'm a little bit conflicted about this one. So this is the third book in the Alchemical Journeys series. I think it came out maybe May? I don't know. Because I get so many of my new releases from the library, I'm kind of used to just always being behind the times. But Tidal Creatures did come through. I really loved the first book, Middle Game. It was amazing. The second book, Seasonal Fears, was total utter trash. Also, the separate Up and Under series is kind of a spin-off of that. Quite enjoyed the first book. The other three also kind of trash in my opinion. And a lot of Seanan McGuire stuff that I've been picking up lately just hasn't been something that I've been enjoying. So we go into Tidal Creatures with a lot of trepidation, but I am now a third of the way through the audiobook because I went for a run yesterday. I think so. Anyway, I'm still quite conflicted about it. And there was actually, right at the very beginning of the book, a little phrase basically saying that not every story is for every person. And so maybe the story isn't for you and you shouldn't feel bad about not continuing. And it said it in a way that fit into the book quite well. And there are certain parts of the book where the wording is so great and the concepts are so amazing. The way it's kind of talking about existence and metaphorical concepts. There's some really amazing stuff within this series, and the way the whole alchemy works, and just these different concepts that are embodied as humans or in humans. Anyway, there's things that I really love about this series, but there's other parts where it just feels like it's waffling and never getting to the point, and a lot of digressions that I feel like are distractions rather than fitting into the plot. Also, the audiobook. It's actually Amber Benson, who I think was Tara in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series. And I feel like a lot of the way that she's narrating the story is like she's bored, or like she thinks the characters are bored, but the characters should not be bored. So primarily we're following two characters. One is this embodiment of the concept of the moon, and every night or some nights she will go into the impossible city and basically travel across the sky as the moon. And then other times that her goddess aspect kind of pulls back and she's just like a student at the university. But there are a lot of different people who are these embodiments of the moon, because there's just so many different concepts of moon goddesses around the world, and it seems like some of them have been being killed off, so there's something strange going on there. There's also throughout this series alchemists who are basically trying to use these people who are embodiments of different concepts, using them to basically take control of them and become godlike themselves. So the alchemists are the bad guys, and so we're very suspicious that they have something to do with what's going on with the moon, because there's some other projects going on where they are trying to create these moon people. I'm so bad at explaining this series. The thing is, the way that it's written, it does come across as very real, but as soon as you talk about it, it doesn't sound like it makes sense at all, which is very common with fantasy books. Anyway, on one side, we've got these moon goddesses being killed off, and then we've also got this young girl called Kelpie, and she is not a human, it seems. She thought she was a research lab assistant for the alchemists, but it seems like she's probably not. She's more of some kind of mythological creature that they have created, and she is now for the first time out of the lab and experiencing the human world and trying to find a safe place to exist. And I'm only a third of the way through, so far it's just been a lot of setup, and I guess we'll see where it goes. I still think, I'm enjoying it more than Seasonal Fears, but I'm just don't think it's going to be able to compare to Middle Game. The thing that Middle Game had was that the two main characters in it were so compelling, and their journey was just so emotional and easy to become invested in. Whereas, even though I don't think the stories that we're getting in Tidal Creatures are bad, they're just not to that same level. But, you know, maybe it'll win me over in the rest of the book. I really hope it does, but I'm just doubtful. Anyway, the other surprise that I got from the library is When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. So one thing I was doing while we were away is I just opened up the Libby app. Sometimes I just like to open it up and look at the books that I have on hold and look at the books that I have on loan and see what's due next and think about my reading plans. It's just a nice kind of scrolling that doesn't come with the pressure of scrolling through social media. Anyway, I just happened to open it up and it was like, do you want this skip the line copy of When Among Crows? Because I was on the hold list, but it wasn't going to come through for ages. So of course, I took it. It does mean I only have 2 weeks to read it, so I've decided to bump it ahead of Sword of Kaigen, just because this I have on an ebook that I own. I can read this anytime. Whereas When Among Crows, I need to read it in the next 2 weeks. I will say, it did say that it's still going to keep my original hold for the book, so that if I don't have time to read it in these 2 weeks, I've still got my hold, or I've still got my spot on the hold list, which is quite nice. So anyway, this I'm also about 1/3 of the way through, according to my Kobo, and it's quite lovely. I will say the first chapter, was it the first chapter or the prologue? Anyway, the first part, I love that the most. We're kind of getting the perspective of this Polish mythological creature. I'm not sure what he was. Is he a tree type thing? He had flowers growing out of his eyes, and he kind of has this responsibility where I'm not quite sure how often, every year, let's say, this flower blooms and he goes to protect it because it has some kind of magical properties, and then he comes across this guy who is trying to take the flower and basically has to undergo this trial in order to get the flower. And then the rest of the story is more about this guy. So I kind of preferred the very strange perspective of this Polish tree god creature thing. Now it's a little bit more normal, but I'm still enjoying it. It is written in a very kind of lyrical way. I would say it kind of reminds me of Victoria Schwab's writing style, except that it feels like it has a lot more substance to it, which is, I guess, a criticism I've had of Victoria Schwab's works lately. But When Among Crows, I really love the atmosphere that it's creating of this world where there's all these Polish mythological creatures and there's a lot of magic in the world. And it's just all vibes so far. It does seem like this guy is trying to track down Baba Yaga for some reason that we're not really clear on yet. So there's a lot of mystery, and it's written in that kind of way where you don't know what's happening yet. So 1/3 of the way in, but I still don't really know what's happening, but I'm enjoying the journey. I will say that does contrast to the Memory Theatre. So this, I've read another part, so I guess I'm about halfway through now. Let's say halfway through. And do I know what's happening? I feel like this is the kind of story where I feel like there's some underlying message or some kind of symbology, and that it's all going over my head. So the second part was all about Dora and Thistle are trying to find Thistle's name so that he can get back to his family, and they've come across this Memory Theatre. So I got to the part with the name, which is basically this small theatre group, and whenever they hear somebody's story, or sometimes these plays just arrive in their playbook and they will act out these plays just of people's lives, and it's all very strange, and I don't mind reading it, but I also don't know the point of it, so I'm just not getting any momentum going with that part of the story. And then the other part of the story, we're actually following one of the masters of the gardens, so one of the adults who are these very extravagant people who see themselves as some kind of nobles that everyone should obey and worship. And one of them sort of discovered time, and as a result has ended up not in the gardens anymore, and she's trying to figure something out as well. And so she's also going on a bit of a journey to these different places. And she did come across this magical library that's constantly at risk of burning. There's so many interesting magical concepts in this, and I'm frustrated because I don't feel like anything's being done with them, and I don't feel like this has a direction. It just has a lot of interesting things in it, but not interesting things happening, if you know what I mean. So I'm reading this and I'm kind of enjoying it while I'm reading it, but as soon as I put it down, I'm like, what is even happening? And I don't necessarily feel like motivated to pick it up again. So this isn't going as well as I would have hoped, because this is a 5-star prediction for me. Anyway, then the other thing is the Sword of Kaigen. So as I said, I'm probably going to put this down and only pick it up once I've finished When Among Crows. And I mean, my Kobo says I've only got 2 hours of this, but I don't know, because I've been picking up e-book type things just before bed and I've been really tired. I haven't been getting through that much of them. Sword of Kaigen, since I last talked to you, I've only read one more chapter, and it was basically the mother, Mizaki. Anyway, the mother, we're now getting her story as she is younger. She's obviously gone out of Kaigen for a short time and getting to experience the world. And she's kind of involved in this like crime fighting group. And there's a big debate that she has with the leader of this group about whether it's okay to kill criminals. And then she's out trying to get some better training to become a better fighter. And it's fine, but I guess I just felt like that chapter was really long and I was bored for most of it. Also, she kind of has a crush on this leader of the crime fighting group that she's in, and the way that that was framed was very young adult, not like a mature relationship, which she's a young adult, so that makes sense, but it's not what I want to read. It just felt awkward and awful. And I'm much more interested in Mamoru, her son. I'm much more interested in his struggle about discovering that everything about the world isn't what he thought it was. And I guess through Mizaki's chapter as her being younger is meant to be showing us what the real world is actually like. But I don't know, I'm just more interested in Mamoru's story. So I'll be interested, hopeful, that when I do get back to this, we'll be able to get back to that. I feel like I've forgotten something even though I've just been talking for ages. Oh, yeah. I did finish reading Children of Men and the ending kind of went how I thought it would. It's one as well like this one where I felt like some of it was going over my head because I think there's a lot of like Christian references in there or a lot of parallels to certain Christian stories, and I don't know enough about that to maybe get all of it, and I'm probably not interested in thinking about that. But just the whole ending was more about this plot that I wasn't interested in, and I felt like we didn't get enough like further description and development of this really interesting world and how people are dealing with the fact that there's no more children and just like the slow rundown of the human race. Like, the concept of that and the descriptions in the beginning were so great, but where it went, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't interesting to me. So that's a shame. And it's also a shame that I can't go and watch the movie because I remember that I liked the movie better, and I think they changed the plot in the movie quite a bit. And I saw some people criticizing the movie for that, but I think for me at least it was probably a good change. But it's been a long time since I saw that movie, so who knows. Anyway, it has been kind of rainy, or it looks like the next week or so is going to be kind of rainy. So I'm mostly going to be doing boxy things and reading. Mainly these two, and Tidal Creatures if I go on a run. I feel like somehow I'm reading too many things at once. Oh, because I'm also actually reading Remina by Junji Ito. But anyway, I've been talking for too long, so I'll tell you about that more when I've read more of that. But I'm reading a lot of things. Somehow. Hello, so we are starting to get to the stage where we are surrounded by boxes, even though really we still have 3 more weeks, so it's a little bit early, but I think we're just kind of impatient to get everything sorted out and like just want to like relieve our anxiety by knowing that all the boxing is sorted out, even though there have been a few times when it's been annoying because things that I would like are already in boxes. Anyway, and my friend is still annoying me, as you can tell. Anyway, let me tell you about my reading. Firstly, I did finish off When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. I really enjoyed this, kind of. I think it had some really amazing ideas. I loved the way the Polish mythological creatures were brought in, and we had these like kind of vampires that would eat like fear or anger or different emotions, in the way that fitted into the story was very satisfying with the way that it was used to kind of express emotions through flavors at times. And our characters, we kind of ended up with 3 main characters, very angsty, and I liked them. The problem I have with it is that I felt like when we would change perspective, like it's all written in third person, but the chapters are written kind of from the different characters' perspectives, and they still felt all very much the same, and it was very difficult to tell them apart. And that, plus I think just the shortness of this book, meant I didn't really feel like they were properly developed. As well, it is written in like present tense, third person present tense, and I always feel like first person present tense I can get on board with, but third person present tense is always a bit of a struggle for me. And as well, like there's some action scenes in this book, and I would have thought that present tense would mean we get more like immediacy or more urgency to the action scenes, but instead, at least for me, I felt like more distance from the action scenes. And I don't know if it's something also about the more lyrical writing style that took away from it as well, or just made it hard to follow all the time what was actually happening. So like emotionally, to be honest, I wanted to give this 5 stars because there are some things I really liked about it, but I just feel like I can't justify that because of some of the issues I had with the writing and the character development. But there were some really nice reveals in there, and there were also some really lovely lines. Like I underlined quite a lot of lines, and even though it wasn't perfect, I had a really good time with it. I do think people who like Victoria Schwab or Olivia Blake, I think will really like this. I wish it had been longer. Maybe I just have a preference for longer books, but I think a lot of the things I had problems with could have been more fully developed in a longer book. But I also think it's hard because I think in some ways the lyrical writing style was a bit of a limitation, even though it was also very nice. Anyway, overall, I really liked it, and I think it lived up to the beautiful cover, which is the main thing that it needed to do. Then I haven't finished anything else off, but I have made some progress. So the Memory Theatre, I finished another part. This part was called The Mountains, and I now just have one last part. What was it called? Homecoming. And I'm so conflicted about this one. There are some really dark and twisted things that did happen, like very small parts though. So there's a few times where I'm like, oh, this is what I want this book to be. And then it just goes back to not quite feeling like a real story. And again, maybe it is the shortness and the lack of character development, but it's also because I still don't really know what this book is about. There was a part where I started thinking, honestly, I was thinking maybe this is a book about parenting and like the fears of raising your child in a scary world with war. And like, maybe, but I don't think so. I don't know. I still don't really know what this is about. I guess I'm going to read the last part and see if I work it out. But maybe it is just meant to be kind of a weird, dark and whimsical story. I'm sure it's meant to have a meaning. I don't know what it is. And I'm not getting a lot from reading this other than like tiny moments of enjoyment and then disappointment when it doesn't go any further. I really was hoping this will be 5 stars, but I cannot see the last part turning that around. Next on my stack, I got my phone to remind me that I am now up to 70% of the way through Tidal Creatures. This as well, I think the problem with it is that it's just far too slow paced, because 70% of the way in and basically our two main characters have just met, which is really what's been set up so far, and I don't feel like that should have taken 70% of the book. When we think about middle game, we pretty much get like their whole childhood and their young adult life like into their university years, and it's like very in depth and lots of things happen to them. Like there's so much more depth and just things happening in middle game, and so it's much more faster paced and there's so much more to become invested in. Whereas Tidal Creatures, I kind of like it, and there are some interesting concepts going on, but it's just not doing enough with them. Like it's having different characters explain different things to other characters, and the explanations are interesting, but I want those ideas applied to the plot, which again, middle game did. Maybe even Seasonal Fairs did it better in some ways, but I just hated all the concepts and the characters in that one. Anyway, I'm almost liking Tidal Creatures. I have heard the ending does come together quite well and actually has some action and some plot. So fingers crossed for that. But so far, like, it's been fine, but I always just feel like it's waiting to actually do something. And then lastly, because I'm still reading too many things. Oh, actually, before I talk about Sword of Kaigen, I should mention the other day I said I was reading Remina by Junji Ito, and I think I've gotten only like a few chapters into that. This is basically like Junji Ito is a horror manga creator, and I've really loved some of his stuff, especially like Uzumaki, which is all about this village which gets a fear of spirals and everything gets more and more out of control. And I think in Junji Ito's best work, it's kind of a simple concept that then escalates until it's out of control. So far with Remina, it's not really doing it for me. So basically, the scientist discovers this planet that is out there, and anytime the planet comes near another star or near another planet, those stars or planets will disappear. And then it kind of just goes on a weird random path, and suddenly it starts coming towards Earth. And people get in their head, because the scientist named this planet after his daughter, and people get it in their head for some reason that the scientist and his daughter are calling the planet towards Earth, and it like makes Jupiter and some other planets disappear. So, you know, they think it's going to make Earth disappear. And there are some interesting things about the planet, but there's also some really weird, creepy bits where these guys are like fighting over who gets to be the one that looks after Remina the girl, not Remina the planet. And it's kind of like Tomie, where there's this other woman who every man like falls in love with her to the point where they want to kill her. That's a terrible description, but I can't be explaining all of Junji Ito's work. Anyway, it's kind of like that, but with a lot less foundation. And it's weird because I'm expecting it to focus on this planet, and then we're not even focusing on that, even though the planet is the most interesting thing that's going on. So I don't know. I'm going to continue it, but I'm at the moment thinking it's the worst thing I've read by Junji Ito, which is a shame. Anyway, then also Sword of Kaigen. So this one, I read just one more chapter again last night. I have to say, I feel like every chapter that I've read in this, actually, what chapter am I up to? Chapter 8. So I have read 7 chapters along the way. But chapter 7 was basically Mizaki kind of giving you like a quick summary of her life through from when she's kind of first come back to Kaigen, and she's getting married and she's attempting to have sons for her husband, and she's having miscarriages, so trigger warnings for that. And just like generally being a mother but not really wanting to be a mother, and not really having a loving husband or a supportive family. Honestly, it was really heart-wrenching to read, and I almost cried. Maybe I even cried a little bit. But I do think at this point, Mizaki's character, even though I still don't know that I understand her decision process as to why she's even doing what she's doing, maybe I do. But I think we know her a lot better now, so then when Mamoru comes back to talk to her about what he's been learning, you can understand more the conversation that they have about it. And I because that last chapter was so emotional, I'm really interested to see where this will take it next. Will I read more of this before I wrap up this vlog? Maybe a little bit, because I still want to finish off the Memory Theatre and Tidal Creatures at least before I wrap this up. But it shouldn't take me too long to read this, because the last part is fairly short. And then maybe I will try and listen to some of Tidal Creatures while I put a few more books in boxes. At the moment, I'm kind of just trying to do like every day one little house thing, so maybe I'll do a couple of boxes today. Hello, so I am here to wrap up the vlog, and I have finished the Memory Theatre. I feel very conflicted about this one. There were some things that I really liked about it, and I actually think at the end, maybe it was just trying to say a lot about stories. In a lot of ways, it felt just like a fairy tale type story, or like a Narnia type story, or I guess like an Alice in Wonderland type story that you would read for children, except for like all the murder and the violence. Except for all of that, it felt like a kid's book, and I don't think I was really expecting to get that from Karin Tidbeck. And I mean, I know all the murder and the violence meant it wasn't a children's book, and there were some I think some messages in there. I definitely got something about the value of stories, and also I guess about the consequences of violence and about how you can treat each other better. Like, I think there's some good messages and some good ideas in here, but overall it just didn't do enough, and it left me wishing that it was longer. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminded me of Seanan McGuire's Up and Under series, which I didn't particularly like after the first book. And I think at its best, the Up and Under series is better than this, but at its worst, this was better. But that same kind of dark, whimsical feel. So maybe if you like that series, you might want to try this. Maybe. Anyway, this was a 5-star prediction for me, but I think instead I'm giving it 3 stars. So that's a fail for me. The other thing I did finish is Tidal Creatures, and that as well, I think I'm giving a 3 stars. There were some things, again, that I really liked about it. I think this did a much better job than the second book, Seasonal Fairs, of using the concepts in an interesting way and developing the concepts in an interesting way. But I just think in the end it was too slow paced. Because I was listening to the audiobook, the ending for me kind of surprised me, because even though it was escalating and we got more plot in the end like I was hoping, even though it was escalating, I still thought, based on that I'd heard that the ending was really good and it had a lot of action, I was still expecting something more to happen, and then it was like, it's the end. And I thought, really? I thought we were going to do something cooler with that, but I guess not. Still, while this one I feel like was a fail because it wasn't the 5 stars I was hoping for, with Tidal Creatures I was really just hoping that it wouldn't be a 1 or a 2 star, so the fact that it's a 3 star is a win. It's weird how that works out. As well, I did finish Remina by Junji Ito, and I didn't like it. I just think it spent way too much time focusing on these people trying to attack Remina, when it finally got more information about this planet, that was really interesting, and I would have loved to have had that be the main focus of the story, but it wasn't. I just don't think there was enough substance to the story, and in a lot of ways it was just rehashing ideas from Tomie, and I don't know, the most disappointing thing I've read by Junji Ito. It made me want to reread Uzumaki just to remember how great it could be. I guess that's a few disappointments, but I have to remember I read some better things at the start of the week, didn't I? I can't even remember now. Oh, When Among Crows, that was better, but also in some ways disappointing. Anyway, hopefully next week will be a better week, because I am hoping to read some of my favorite authors, as well as continuing Sword of Kaigen, which I did read a little bit more last night, but I won't tell you about it. I will save my thoughts on the rest of this for my next vlog, because now that I'm getting beyond the first intro to the book, I need to read more before I tell you stuff so that I don't tell you too much of the plot. Anyway, do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about in this video. I would love to chat with you down in the comments, or let me know if you are interested in reading them. Or if you've been reading anything interesting lately, tell me about that too. And do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.